Jesus reveals how to silence negative thoughts and rebuild unshakable faith. Have you ever felt like a prisoner inside your own mind? As if negative thoughts pursue you endlessly day and night without giving a break? Have you ever woken up with a heavy heart, as if something bad was about to happen, even without knowing exactly what? Have you ever tried to smile on the outside, but inside you were in pieces, struggling to believe that God was still with you? If you've been through this, know you're not alone, and this video did not come to you by chance. Jesus reveals to you today a powerful truth, which many ignore, but which can completely transform the way you face your darkest thoughts. But before you discover this secret, I need you to take a break. Take a deep breath. Allow yourself to reveal, because what's about to be revealed, it's not a simple message. It is a divine summons, an answer you may have been waiting for years, and now comes as a whisper straight from God's heart to yours. Most people never realize how much their thoughts are shaping their faith and how much their emotions have silenced God's voice. But today, you will realize. You will see clearly why so many prayers seem to go unanswered. Why do you feel distant from God, even though you try to be close? And more than that, you will discover how to silence the voices of doubt, fear, guilt, and rebuild a faith so firm that not even chaos can shake it. This message is for anyone who has ever asked themselves, does Jesus see me? Does he know what I'm going through? And the answer you will hear will surprise your heart, but be careful. Don't expect a magic formula. What will be revealed here is a calling, an invitation to true, emotional, and spiritual transformation. A path where Jesus not only heals your mind, but strengthens your soul. So if something inside you is shaking, if you feel like this is for you, it is because it is. You are here because Jesus wanted you to be. He's about to touch places inside you that perhaps no one else has seen. Get ready, because what's coming could change everything. Before we move on, I need you to understand something very important. This moment you are living right now is not a coincidence. Jesus reveals to you that you are here because he heard your cry in silence, because he saw your tiredness, your struggle to silence the thoughts that don't stop, and decided to bring you to this video to tell you, I am with you. Take a deep breath. Open your heart to this message. You are in a sacred space. This is your meeting place with the truth, and the truth will set you free. Get ready, because God can speak directly to you today. And when he speaks, the impossible moves. But before we continue, I want to invite you to manifest spiritually. Yes, spiritually. Why comment here, like this video, share it with someone? It's an act of faith. It is evangelization. If this word has already touched your heart, declare in the comments, I trust in Jesus. Write this with faith, in pain if necessary, because your comment could be exactly what someone needs to not give up today. And if you felt that this message had something special, hit the like button so that others can also be blessed. You can be the channel Jesus uses to reach someone right now. Don't leave yet. Jesus revealed something very important about this situation, and you need to hear it before leaving this video. What you will discover in a moment could forever change the way you deal with your thoughts and your faith. But before you receive the revelation you came for, you need to pause and face one of the most silent and devastating battles in spiritual life, when the mind simply won't stop, when negative, anxious, and catastrophic thoughts take over the soul like waves in a rough sea. And it is precisely there that Jesus reveals something that can change everything. It was night. The sea was rough, the wind sharp like a blade. And there he was, Pedro, in the middle of the waters, surrounded by dense darkness, advancing towards the impossible. One step, another, and then fear, the doubt, accelerated thinking. What if I sink? What if this isn't real? What if I die here? The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that was beginning to brew inside him. And like lightning, the imbalance came. The feet that had been firm until then began to give way. Pedro began to sink, swallowed by his own mind, by his own fear. He looked at the wind. He took his eyes off Jesus. How many times does our life look like this same scenario? We even start off well. We even take the first steps of faith, believing that we will finally get rid of the anxiety, the guilt, the destructive thoughts. But all it takes is a stronger wind, a harsh word, a problem we didn't expect, and everything comes crashing down. The mind speeds up. There's that silent panic, that knot in your chest, the certainty that it's going to go wrong. What if I fail? What if they abandon me again? What if it's all in vain? Catastrophic thoughts, mental scripts created by fear, and faith, once firm, begins to slip. But what if I told you that it was exactly at that moment, the very second that Peter was sinking, that Jesus reached out his hand, not when he was strong, not when he had unshakable faith, but when he was drowning. The Bible says in Matthew 14:31, "And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him, and said to him, 'O you of little faith, why did you doubt?'" This sentence is not a condemnation, it's a calling. It's as if Jesus said, "You didn't have to go through this alone. I was here the whole time." And here is the revelation that many have never heard. Negative thoughts only have power when we stop looking at Jesus. This is when we focus on the wind, on the problem, on what can go wrong, that the mind becomes this whirlwind. But when the focus returns to Christ, even the most violent sea turns into a road. How many times have you felt like Pedro? He started believing, but soon the thought said, "It won't work. You don't deserve it. You will fall again." And maybe you really did sink. But today, Jesus reveals to you that he still has his hand outstretched, that even in the midst of mental confusion, fear, anxiety, he is there saying, "Look at me, not at the wind." Maybe you've never told anyone this, but there are nights when you just can't sleep because your mind won't stop. It's like a tragedy movie playing on loop, and all you can think about is the bad things that could happen. But what no one told you is that these thoughts are not your truth. They do not come from God. They are echoes of old pains, of traumas, of fears that you never had space to heal. But now you are faced with a real chance for change. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine Jesus walking towards you on the water. He doesn't wait for you to be strong. He walks to you in the middle of the storm. And when you start to sink, he doesn't judge you. He holds you. This is the difference between religion and revelation. Religion says, have faith. Jesus reveals to you, even in your little faith, I am enough. And perhaps the biggest mistake you've made to date was thinking that you needed to have everything under control for God to act. But today, that lie is broken, because Jesus is not waiting for you to get your shit together. He's waiting for you to look at him, that's all. A look, a gesture, a thought of surrender, and then silence takes the place of confusion. Peace, faith, rest, and here's something that few understand. The more you try to fight negative thoughts with your own strength, the more tired you become. Because this battle cannot be won with logic. You win with surrender. And Jesus doesn't want you to pretend you're okay. He wants you to say, Lord, I'm sinking, help me. Because it was exactly this prayer, simple, raw, sincere, that saved Peter. And maybe now you're there, on the other side of the screen, with tears in your eyes, feeling like this story is yours. And indeed, she is. Because today, Jesus reveals to you that unshakable faith is not born in the absence of winds. It is born when, even in fear, you choose to look at him. If this word is touching your heart, if you feel that Jesus is speaking to you right now, write in the comments, I trust in Jesus. Maybe your comment will be the confirmation someone needs. Perhaps what you declare now will be the first step of someone who is also sinking into silence. But that's not all. Something even deeper is about to be revealed. Because if fear can make us sink, anxiety can trap us in an even more cruel cycle. Now let's enter the mind of someone who, even in the presence of Jesus, was overcome by anxiety. Get ready, because what Jesus revealed to her can completely transform the way you deal with your concerns. What if I told you that even those who love Jesus can be consumed by anxiety, that even in his presence the heart can race, the mind can run out of control, and the soul can get lost in worries that seem to have no end? There is a story that many read without realizing the depth of the silent pain it reveals. Martha, a woman who welcomed Jesus into her home, who served him with dedication, but who was restless. Not because of a lack of faith, but because of being overweight, for carrying the world inside your chest. And it was in this environment, in a home where Jesus was present, that anxiety manifested itself strongly. Imagine the scene. A full house. Jesus, the Messiah, the Savior, was there. But Martha couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't hear. She was in constant motion, trying to make everything work out, trying to please, trying to control everything around her. Her mind must have been full of mental lists. The bread needs to bake, the water needs to boil, the environment needs to be perfect. But what was imperfect was her insides. While her sister Mary was at the feet of Jesus in silence, Martha was busy with tasks, filled with anxiety. And then she explodes, "Sir, is it okay for my sister to let me serve alone? Tell her to help me." Luke 10:40. It's at that moment that Jesus reveals something profound to you, something that goes straight to the heart of your anxiety. Martha, Martha, you are restless and worry about many things, but only one is necessary. Luke 10:41-42. Do you understand? What is happening here? Martha was not far from God. She was with Jesus inside the house, but anxiety made her lose focus. That's why this story is so powerful, because it shows us that anxiety isn't a lack of faith. It's an excess of distraction. It's too much of an attempt to control. It's too much internal noise. How many times have you felt like Martha? In the middle of the routine, trying to make everything work out, trying to maintain the image that everything is fine, but inside, in shambles, the mind racing, thoughts running over each other, the heart racing as if it were always on alert. And even with faith, even believing in God, you can't stop. Because there's a part of you that thinks that if you're not in control, everything will fall apart. But what if I told you that this control you fight so hard to maintain is what's holding you back? That this need to handle everything, to always be strong, always ready, always active, is what is keeping you away from the presence that calms. Martha was worried about legitimate things. She was not sinning, but she was missing the essentials. And here comes a revelation that can change the way you see everything. Faith grows when anxiety gives way to surrender, when you stop, breathe, and choose to be at the feet of Jesus, not as someone who is useless, but as someone who understands that peace comes from presence, not performance. Jesus reveals to you that the secret is not in doing more. It's about to stop, in choosing the best part, in sitting at his feet and listening. Because when you are silent inside, he speaks inside. When you stop trying to control everything with your mind, he takes control of what matters. Maybe your anxiety has made you feel ashamed. Maybe you feel like you're less spiritual because you can't calm down. But the truth is that Jesus never demanded emotional perfection from you. He invites you into his presence. He invites you to choose. Martha was distracted by many things. Mary chose the only thing necessary, to be with him. And you, what do you choose today? Take a deep breath. Imagine yourself in that room. Imagine Jesus looking you in the eye and saying, "Your name, you are restless, worried, overwhelmed, but only one thing is necessary. And this thing is not solving everything. It is simply being with him." Anxiety will tell you that you can't stop, that you have to do more, take care of everything, resolve it yourself. But Jesus reveals to you that stopping is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is in this pause, in this inner silence, that faith breathes again. If this message is moving you, if it is illuminating points in your mind that you have always tried to ignore, declare in the comments, "Jesus, I choose your presence." Maybe your decision today will inspire someone who is also running inside, but there is still an even deeper pain, often hidden from everyone. A feeling that tightens the chest and whispers in the silence, "You are alone." What if I told you that even the greatest prophet felt this way? That even after great victories, loneliness can scream louder than faith? Get ready, because what Jesus reveals to you in this next story will touch the most hidden part of your soul. There are moments when the silence is so heavy that it feels like shouting. When you look around and feel like no one really sees what's going on inside you, and even surrounded by people, even receiving words of encouragement, there is a loneliness that doesn't disappear. A feeling of being completely invisible, even to God. If you've ever felt this, take a deep breath, because what you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. There is a man in the Bible who lived one of the most powerful experiences with God, who defeated kings, faced crowds, and saw fire come down from the sky, but who also had a day when loneliness spoke louder than faith. His name was Elijah. Elijah had just challenged the prophets of Baal, proved that the Lord was the only true God, and witnessed a miracle in front of the entire nation, a true moment of glory. But in the next chapter, he's asking for death. "Enough. Lord, take my life." 1 Kings 19:4. What a contrast, isn't it? From a mountain where fire fell to the desert where silence consumed it. He felt exhausted, misunderstood, and most of all, alone. And this loneliness wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, emotional, mental. It was as if the presence of God, before so evident, was now far away, absent, silent. Elijah lay down under a juniper tree and wished he no longer existed. How many times has this prayer been similar to yours? "God, I can't take it anymore." You even had moments of faith, of victory, of overcoming, but suddenly the soul emptied, and what remained was just the echo of pain, of incomprehension. The people around you can't imagine the weight you carry, and the more you try to explain, the more it seems like no one understands. Not even God. And then comes the silence, a silence that screams inside the soul, that says, "You're alone, no one sees, not even God." But it is at this point in the story that something absolutely transformative happens. Elijah, hiding in a cave waiting for an answer, is surprised. The Bible says that a great and strong wind came, but the Lord was not in the wind. Then an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't there either. Then a fire. Still, God did not manifest himself. And then came a still, small voice. It was in a whisper that God spoke. 1 Kings 19:12. Jesus reveals to you a profound truth here. God has not stopped speaking to you. He has only changed his tone. The noise in your mind may be waiting for a thunderclap, a thunderous response, a grand signal. But the Spirit of God chooses to speak in silence, in delicacy. That's why sometimes when everything is silent, you feel like God has abandoned you, when in fact he is closer than ever, whispering in the depths of your soul. This whisper from God does not come to impress, it comes to restore. And that's exactly what Elijah received there, a profound restoration. God feeds you, strengthens, who gives you new direction, and that man who wanted to die gets up to fulfill even more of the mission that God had prepared. Maybe what you're missing today isn't strength, but listen, maybe your soul is crying out for a manifestation when what God wants to give you is a whisper, a subtle but real presence, a peace that needs no explanations, just surrender. He hasn't forgotten you. He didn't abandon you in the cave. He is there, in the most hidden corner of your heart, waiting for you to silence the internal screams, to hear him say, I'm here. Take a deep breath now. Close your eyes for a moment. Allow yourself to feel and listen. This emptiness you feel is not the absence of God. It is a space that he wants to fill. Silence can be scary, but it is also where the most profound miracles are born. Elijah discovered this there, alone in the cave, and you can find that out right now. If this message spoke to your heart, if you identified with this silent cry of the soul, comment here. Lord, speak to me in the silence. Maybe your comment is the confirmation someone needed to know they are not alone in this battle. Your testimony may spark hope in someone else's heart right now, and if this word brought peace to your heart, even if for a moment, press the like button so that others can also be blessed. Your touch may be the means by which this message reaches the soul of someone on the verge of emotional collapse. But this is still just the beginning, because there are times when the problem isn't the silence. It's the overwhelming certainty that there's no way out, that everything is lost, that nothing more can be done. And it is exactly at this point that a new revelation will transform the way you face your darkest thoughts. Get ready, because the next story involves dry bones, a lifeless valley, and a question that God asked to the heart of a prophet. And that today, He asks directly to yours. Because what comes next isn't just about hope, it's about resurrecting what you once considered buried. There is a moment in life when the heart no longer screams, it whispers. A moment where fear turns into bitter acceptance. A point where the mind stops fighting and just repeats like a dark echo. There is no other way. Maybe you know this feeling well. Maybe I'm living it now. When we look at our problems, at the emotional chaos that has taken place, it is easy to believe that everything is dead, dry, lifeless. But what if I told you that it was exactly in this scenario, in this type of thinking, that God decided to make one of the most impactful revelations in the Bible? A revelation that could be the breath your soul needs to breathe again. The scene is desolate. The prophet Ezekiel is taken in spirit to a valley full of bones, very dry, and the text makes a point of repeating this. These were bones that were not only dead, but had been devoid of any trace of life for a long time. An ancient death, irreversible to human eyes. And there, in that scenario of total despair, God asks, Son of man, can these bones live? Ezekiel 37:3. This is where Jesus reveals something powerful to you, because God could simply order life, but He asks. He invites Ezekiel to look at the impossible and declare faith. And Ezekiel answers something that many of us would say, Lord God, you know. An answer that carries doubt, but also reverence. He doesn't say yes, but He doesn't say no either. He places uncertainty in the hands of the only one who has power over life and death. How many times have you looked at your emotional life, at your thoughts, and seen a valley of bones, destroyed thoughts, broken dreams, dried up hopes? And then you asked yourself, is there any way to live again? Is there any way for my mind to have peace again? Can my faith be rebuilt? The world may say no. Logic might say no. But today, Jesus reveals to you that when He blows, even what seems irreversibly lost comes back to life. God tells Ezekiel to prophesy. Yes, speaking life where there was only death, declare hope where there was only ruin. And something starts to happen. A noise, a sound of restoration, bones coming together, tendons emerging, meat covering. But something was still missing. The breath, because it's not enough to appear alive. It's the Spirit of God that truly gives life. And when God blows, the bones come back to life like a standing army. Maybe today your heart is like that valley, formless, no function, lifeless. But what if I told you there was a noise coming? That as you watch this message, as your mind begins to be reprogrammed by the Word, God is already moving what seemed immobile. Jesus reveals to you that your thoughts are not the end of the story, and that, even if everything in you says, there is no other way, the last word remains His. And maybe what stopped you until now was this: you stopped believing that God still can. You got used to the pain. You learned to live with negative thoughts as if they were part of who you are, but they are not. They are dry bones. They are remnants of past battles. And God is asking today, do you believe that I can make it alive? Again, stop now, just for a moment. Close your eyes and imagine that valley. Imagine the bones of your past, your pain, your emotional health, all scattered around. And hear his voice saying to you, prophesy, Son of Man. In other words, declare, speak life. Not because you have strength, but because he has authority. Maybe it's time for you to stand up like Ezekiel and speak to your own heart. Go back to living. Go back to believing. Go back to dreaming. The valley is not the end. The thought that tells you there is no other way is a lie. Because when God enters history, everything can be rebuilt, and it doesn't matter how long this valley has been dry. Time does not limit the power of God. If this message is making your eyes fill with tears, if you are feeling an inner noise, a sign that God is touching the deepest part of your soul, write in the comments, blow on me, Lord. Your declaration of faith may be the first sound of your own resurrection. It could be the beginning of a new mental, spiritual, and emotional cycle. And here's something even more shocking. You're not watching this by chance. The Spirit brought you here because he wants to breathe again. So, if this word is reaching, you press the like button now, so that this message reaches more people who, like you, thought there was no other way. Your action is seed. And seeds in the kingdom generate harvests of life. And here comes the most impressive part of this journey. Because while some think the worst is over, others live with their hearts sinking, waiting for the next tragedy. Fear of the future has become so constant, so present, that even good news seems dangerous. What if I told you that living on constant alert is, in fact, an invisible prison? That fear can stop you from living what God has prepared? In the next block, we will dive into the story of a man who feared evil and saw evil happen. Because Jesus reveals to you today how to exchange the prediction of tragedy for the eternal promise. And what you will hear can free you from the quietest fear there is. Sometimes the danger is not in something that has already happened, but in what the mind insists on predicting. It's like living under a dark cloud that never rains, but is always about to collapse. It's waking up with your heart racing, not because of anything real, but because of a constant feeling that everything is going to go wrong. And even though nothing serious is happening, you live as if you were on the edge of the abyss. This fear of the future, this fear that something bad is lurking, consumes the soul in a silent but devastating way. Do you feel this? As if you lived on alert, waiting for the next pain, the next problem, the next loss. This silent pain has a name, and it is recorded in the story of a man who deeply knew the anguish of expecting the worst, Job, an honest, upright, God-fearing man, and yet someone who carried a fear that few know with such intensity. Most know Job's pain after the tragedy, but few realize that before everything happened, his heart was already restless. In Job 3:25, he himself declares, "What I fear comes upon me, and what I fear happens to me." This phrase echoes like a cry from someone who, even in times of peace, lived as a prisoner of the anticipation of pain. Job feared losing his children. He was afraid that something would happen to his possessions. He feared that stability would be snatched away at any moment. And this is precisely what Jesus reveals to you here. When constant fear takes the place of faith, we open space for our predictions to become prisons. What Job feared happened, not because he didn't have faith, but because his mind was more focused on what could go wrong than on the God who governs everything. And this is the reality for many today. People who even believe in God, who even pray, who even attend churches, but who live dominated by thoughts like, what if my husband abandons me? What if my son gets sick? What if I lose my job? What if God allows something that I can't bear? This anxiety disguised as precaution undermines peace, steals the present, destroys stability. It's a subtle but constant fear. It's like living looking in the rearview mirror. expecting to be hit at any moment. But what if I told you that living like this is the exact opposite of the trust God expects from you? What if the true act of faith is to rest in the fact that no matter what happens, He will still be God, He will still be good, He will still be enough? Jesus reveals to you today, peace is not in the absence of problems, but in the presence of trust. See what happens to Job after losing everything. He tears his clothes, prostrates himself on the ground, and worships. Yes, he loves it. In the midst of the deepest pain, he still recognizes, the Lord gave, the Lord took. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job 1:21. This is not apathetic acceptance, it's surrender. It is real faith. It is a type of trust that does not depend on the setting, but on the character of God. Now stop for a moment, breathe, and ask yourself, how much time have you wasted living in fear of what hasn't even happened yet? How many blessings have you missed because your mind was too busy anticipating tragedies? Maybe it's time to break this cycle, to declare war against this repetitive thought that says, it's going to be wrong, it's going to end, it's going to hurt. Because Jesus reveals it to you. The fear that dominates needs to be confronted with the faith that frees. You were not born to live in emotional survival mode. You were born to trust, not blindly, but spiritually. Trust that God is in control. Trust that even if something escapes your plan, nothing escapes His plan. Trust that He is more interested in your peace than you are yourself. And this trust is not built overnight. She is fed with the Word, with prayer, with daily delivery. Today you have the choice to continue expecting the worst or start hoping for God's best, to continue feeding the fear or start declaring the promise. Because the truth is, the future hasn't happened yet, and you can decide what you fill it with. Job saw what he most feared would happen, but he also saw God restore everything. Double. Because even in his worst days, God had not given up on him, and He didn't give up on you. If this message is touching you deeply, write in the comments, I will not be led by fear. Take that step. Declare this over your mind. Your comment could be exactly the light that someone else needs to see in the midst of the darkness. And if you felt that this word embraced you, press the like button now. This is not just a click. It's an act of faith, an act of evangelization. It's His way of saying, I want more people to break out of the prison of fear. But what comes next will challenge something even deeper, the feeling of no longer having the strength to continue. Because there is a place in the soul where fear turns into exhaustion, where it's no longer about predicting the worst, but about simply not being able to try anymore. And Jesus reveals to you in this next moment a truth so powerful that even the most tired soul will find rest. But this is still not rock bottom for many. There is a pain that doesn't scream. It whispers repetitively, heavy, exhausting, a pain that does not immediately paralyze but slowly sucks away any emotional energy, any desire to continue. It is the mental and spiritual fatigue that sets in when the soul can no longer pretend that everything is fine. And sometimes it is at this silent and dark point that the heart, already broken, begins to believe that there is no longer a way. This is where many feel that God has forgotten, but Jesus reveals it to you. That is exactly where He comes closest. The darkness of night hung thick over the Garden of Gethsemane. There were no crowds, no miracles, no praises. Only Jesus and the crushing weight of a mission that hurt more than any physical cross could. He looks up to the heavens with teary eyes and says, My soul is deeply saddened, even to the point of death. Matthew 26:38. These words did not come from a weak man, but from the Savior of the world at His most human. Jesus did not hide the weight He carried. He didn't pretend to be strong. He cried. He sweated blood. He asked not to have to go through that. Can you feel the weight of this moment? There is no faith more real than that expressed in pain. And this scene changes everything because it shows that being exhausted is not a lack of faith. Jesus, the Son of God himself, also knew the limits of the soul. And what did he do? He knelt down, he prayed, he delivered. He didn't try to overcome sadness alone. He surrendered to the Father. He trusted that even without seeing a way out, there was a purpose beyond the pain. And that changes everything for us. Because when the soul is heavy, the way is not to resist. It is to surrender. The secret is not to force more strength, but to deliver more confidence. How many times have you felt this way? Getting up every day like you're just surviving, doing what needs to be done, but inside you're begging for relief, trying to smile at others while your inner world is sinking into silence. Maybe you are at that exact point right now. And what Jesus reveals to you is transformative. He understands. He has been exactly where you are, and he doesn't condemn you for feeling this way. On the contrary, he gets even closer. He kneels beside you in your private Gethsemane and extends your hand. Many people carry an additional burden, the guilt of being tired, as if God only accepted those who are always strong, excited, and confident. But this is a lie. The sky is also moved by tired prayers, for tears that no one sees, for sighs that no one hears. And what Jesus did in Gethsemane was open a new path for you to understand that faith is also tiredness left in the right hands. Faith is also crying in God's lap. Faith is also saying, "Father, I can't take it anymore, but I trust in you." This message is for you who are tired of being strong, who has already held on to his own world too much and now feels like it is going to collapse, who has already tried to win alone and now understands that he needs to be carried. Jesus does not ask you for strength. He offers you rest, not a superficial rest, but one that enters the depths of the soul and reorganizes everything inside. And you don't need to earn that rest. He was already conquered by you that night when Jesus decided to follow until the end out of love. When he decided that your pain was worth giving him up. So take a deep breath, close your eyes for a moment, and imagine this scene. Jesus kneeling in prayer with his soul crushed. He knows how you feel. And do you know why he endured all that? For you, so that you would know today that there is a place where your pain makes sense, a place where your tiredness finds solace, a place where your fragility is not rejected, but welcomed. And that place is the heart of God. If this word has touched your heart and you feel on the verge of exhausting all your strength, declare in the comments, "Jesus, I rest in you." Your comment is not just a testimony, it could be the shelter that someone needs to read right now. It could be the spark of faith that reignites another exhausted heart. But this is still just the beginning. Because even when you give everything, there is an even more subtle pain. The feeling that your faith is insufficient, the weight of not being able to trust completely. And it is precisely in this space that Jesus reveals to you a truth that can free your soul. What comes now will change the way you see your own faith. But wait, what if the biggest weight you carry is not pain or fear or exhaustion? What if it's the silent guilt of not being able to fully trust God? Because deep down, you want to believe, you want to rest, you want to deliver. But the mind screams, the heart falters, and the guilt comes like a wave, whispering that maybe God is disappointed in you. But what if Jesus reveals to you that even this struggle he already understands and doesn't judge you for it? Imagine the pain of a parent who sees their child suffering uncontrollably. He tried everything. He looked everywhere for help, but nothing resolved it. And now the last hope is that man from Nazareth. But when he comes before Jesus, he does not present a perfect, firm, unshakable faith. He throws himself at the Master's feet and says, with tears in his eyes and his soul exposed, "I believe, help me in my lack of faith." Mark 9:24. It is at this moment that the sky moves. Jesus does not correct, does not remove, does not demand more faith. He heals, he acts, he responds to the imperfect cry with perfect love. This Father represents millions today. People who feel ashamed of not being able to trust completely, who think they need to have a huge faith to deserve God's action. But Jesus reveals to you that it is not the size of your faith that touches heaven, it is your sincerity. Faith does not need to be perfect, it just needs to be real. And it's real to say, Jesus, I believe, but I'm also afraid. It's real to admit that faith and doubt sometimes go hand in hand. And yet, God chooses to respond. Have you ever felt this way? Carrying an extra weight because everyone around you says, trust in God. But inside you are begging, but how can I trust when everything seems to be going wrong? How can I trust when I have already been hurt trying to believe? How can I trust when faith seems too weak to sustain the pain I experience today? The truth is that God is not expecting an idealized version of you. He responds to the version that is now reading these words, tired, broken, confused, and yet still searching. The father of the demon-possessed boy knew that Jesus was the only hope, but he also recognized his emotional limitations, and that didn't keep him from the blessing. It brought him closer, because faith is not the absence of doubts. It is persistence even with doubts. Faith is continuing to go to Jesus even without guarantees. Faith is running into the arms of God, even when the mind is still full of noise. And it is in this type of faith that miracles happen. Maybe today you need to free yourself from the guilt of not being as strong as others expect you to be. Perhaps you need to hear that it is not your weakness that prevents God from acting, but rather your resistance to being vulnerable. When you admit your fragility, you invite heaven to intervene. When you surrender your insecurity, you invite Jesus to rebuild your trust from love, not obligation. This is an invitation to a sincere heart, to the heart that still trembles but insists, to the heart that still cries but prays, to the heart that, even in pieces, decides to get closer to Jesus. And if that's your heart now, know He has already heard you. He's closer than you think, and that is why you can declare now in the comments, with all the sincerity of your soul, Jesus, help me in my lack of faith. These words are not weakness, they are courage. They are the bridge between your confused today and the tomorrow, where your faith will be restored. Your comment may be the liberation of another heart that also feels too weak to believe. Share your truth, and you will be an instrument of healing for many. If this message touched you, if it somehow freed you from an invisible weight, click the like button now. It may seem small, but this gesture is a seed of faith planted in the heart of someone who is about to give up. Your click could be the touch of God in someone else's life. And here comes something even deeper. Because if the guilt of doubting is already devastating, imagine when the mind becomes the battlefield of uncontrollable negative thoughts. When war rages inside you and every day feels like a new struggle to survive emotionally. And that's when Jesus reveals to you the key to freeing your mind and rescuing your peace. But there is still a battle that doesn't happen outside, but inside you. And it is silent, constant, devastating. It doesn't scream in the ears, but it echoes in the mind. It doesn't bleed on the outside, but it tears on the inside. And the scariest thing is that no one sees it. You talk, smile, work, live, but everything inside your mind is war. And when thoughts become your own enemies, when the mind becomes an uncontrollable battlefield, Jesus reveals to you that victory does not begin with strength. It begins with surrender. Imagine for a moment the Apostle Paul, a man who faced arrests, shipwrecks, persecution, betrayal, but still, he does not say that his greatest war was against the Romans or against false teachers. He writes about an invisible, internal mental struggle. In 2 Corinthians 10:4-5, he says, "The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to destroy strongholds." We destroy arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Paul recognizes that the battlefield is the mind, and the most lethal weapon is the subtle lie that installs itself as truth. How many times have thoughts like, "I'm not enough," "No one cares. God has forgotten me," appeared. Like arrows. How many times have you believed that your thoughts were your identity, but Jesus reveals to you, thoughts are not sentences. They have no power over you unless you feed them as truths. Paul teaches us that it is possible to capture thoughts like prisoners of war and subject them to the light of Christ. But how do you do this when everything in your mind seems disorganized? This is where the Holy Spirit comes in like a silent general who begins to teach you how to identify the origin of your thoughts. It's not automatic, but it's liberating. You begin to realize that not every thought that passes through your mind deserves attention. Some need to be expelled immediately, others confronted with the truth of the word, and some, perhaps the most dangerous, disguised as logic, need to be delivered with tears. Because it's not just about positive thinking, it's about believing the promise, even when your thoughts scream otherwise. Have you ever felt like your mind is your biggest prison? That you try to pray, but random, anxious thoughts invade every quiet second? That you want to rest, but an avalanche of worries wakes you up in the middle of the night? That you want to trust, but your mind whispers 1,000 possibilities of failure? You are not alone. And what's more, you are not defeated. Jesus not only understands this battle, he won it. In the desert, the devil tried to plant thoughts of doubt, if you are the Son of God. But Jesus responded with the word. And today, you can do the same. Every time the thought comes to unsettle you, you can say, "It is written." It is written that you have the mind of Christ. It is written that greater is he who is in you. It is written that there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And when you declare this, you are not just reciting verses. He is wielding spiritual weapons that tear down strongholds. You don't have to win this battle alone. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to learn to turn your thoughts to the one who has never lost a battle. And when you do, that something changes, not just in the spiritual environment, but in your everyday life. Your mind begins to be trained in truth. Your thoughts begin to align with the voice of God. And little by little, mental chaos gives way to peace. Not the peace of the absence of problems, but the peace of the presence of the Prince of Peace. Now take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine Jesus approaching your mind, walking through your confused thoughts, opening doors, breaking down walls, bringing light where there were shadows. Imagine him tenderly saying, "You are not bound. I am your freedom." Feel this truth penetrating, deep, because she is real, and it is happening now. If this message spoke to your heart, write in the comments, "Jesus, rule my mind." Not as a ritual, but as an act of surrender. This comment is a spiritual statement. It's you taking control by handing it over to the real king. And who knows, your comment might be just what someone on the other side of the screen needs to feel like they're not fighting alone. Do you feel this word can free anyone else? Then click "I like" right now. This button isn't just a gesture, it's a seed. It's you saying, "May more minds be free, may more hearts find rest." Jesus reveals to you that every act of faith, no matter how small it may seem, has an eternal impact. But there is still something deeper that needs to be revealed. What if the fear that paralyzes you is not just an emotion, but a lie disguised as protection? What if what you call prudence is actually a saboteur of your purpose? What you are about to discover will change the way you see everything. And here comes the most impressive part of this spiritual journey. Because even when we manage to silence the noise of the mind, there is something that still tries to stop us from moving forward. Fear. Not just any fear, but one that paralyzes, that stops our steps, that makes us retreat before we even try. A fear that disguises itself as prudence, logic, security, and yet behind this facade, he is eroding the calling, stifling the dreams, sabotaging the faith. Jesus reveals to you that fear is not just an emotion, it is a spiritual enemy that needs to be faced with supernatural courage. Imagine the scene. Gideon, the youngest in his house, hidden inside a wine press, working wheat in secret so as not to be seen by the Midianites. The oppression was intense. The people lived in constant fear of attacks. Gideon did not see himself as a warrior, as chosen, much less as someone with enough faith to lead anything. But it is at that exact moment that the angel of the Lord appears and says, "The Lord is with you, mighty man," Judges 6:12. And when Gideon responds by saying that he is weak, small, and the smallest in the house, God does not argue with him. God simply declares, "Go in this strength of yours." Judges 6:14. Because it wasn't about the size of Gideon's strength, it was about the size of the presence of God who sent him. How many times have you felt like Gideon, hidden, afraid to try, fear of exposing yourself, fear of failing, fear of disappointing, in the deepest pain, fear of not being enough for what God has placed in your heart? Maybe today your lagar is the job you hate but can't leave, the relationship that suffocates you but that you don't have the courage to end, the ministry that burns in your spirit but that you repress for fear of being rejected, ridiculed, or not responding. But Jesus reveals to you, fear is not the voice of wisdom, it is the voice of slavery. The mind paralyzes because it believes it needs to be sure of everything before taking the next step. And this is one of the enemy's most paralyzing lies. But God does not call you to walk by guarantees, but by faith. Gideon did not overcome his fears immediately. God allowed him to go through processes, tests, and signs. Because faith is not the absence of fear, it is the choice to continue, even when trembling. And here comes a revelation that can shake your soul. The fear you feel is proportional to the size of the purpose you carry. The enemy does not waste effort on anyone who does not threaten his plans. If he's trying to shut you down with fear, it's because there's a voice inside you that carries liberation. If he's trying to trap you in your comfort zone, it's because there's a calling that will move heaven and earth when you say yes. Gideon needed to learn that courage is not acting without fear. It is acting even when fear screams. And you need it too. The fear of failing, the fear of going wrong, the fear of not being enough, the fear of not being heard, of not being noticed, of not being loved. All these fears scream in the mind, but they are silent in the face of one decision: to obey. Because when God says go, fear loses its power to keep you trapped. And perhaps his biggest mistake to date was waiting for the fear to pass before starting to obey. But Jesus reveals it to you. Courage is born when you move despite fear. When you say, "I go even without understanding. I move forward even without guarantees. I believe even without seeing." And it is in this place of obedience, surrender, and faith that miracles happen. What doors open, what inner voices are silenced, that fear becomes a bridge and not a prison. Do you know what is most beautiful about this story? Gideon starts out shy, insecure, full of doubts, but he ends up as leader of an army that defeats enemies much greater in number and strength. And do you know how he wins? Not with swords, but with faith, divine strategy, and worship. What does this teach you? That your victory will come not through the strength you think you have, but through faith in the God who sends you. You don't have to be everything the world demands. You just need to be where God has placed you and obey with courage. Now take a deep breath and answer honestly. How many important decisions have you postponed out of fear? How many opportunities stopped happening because fear paralyzed you? How many "what if it goes wrong" dominated your mind and drowned out the voice of God? In your heart, fear can no longer dictate your steps. Today, something needs to change. Today, your mind needs to hear another voice, and that voice says, "Go in your strength," not the force of reason, not the strength of self-confidence, but the strength of those who believe even without seeing. If this word spoke to you, comment. Now, Lord, give me courage. Let it be an act of faith, a written prayer, a symbolic step against everything that has chained you up to this point. Your comment could be the spark that reignites courage in someone who is about to give up. And if this message touched your soul, press the like button. This simple gesture can reach those who need to hear it most. You can still win. But what if I told you that even the most destructive thoughts can be completely restored? That there is a type of liberation that goes beyond pretty words and becomes visible even in the expression on your face? What you're about to discover will challenge what you think about sanity, chaos, and restoration. But that's not all. What you're about to hear will profoundly challenge everything you think about control, sanity, and the real battle that goes on inside the mind. Because there are times when fear doesn't just paralyze, it consumes. And when that happens, we are no longer just talking about insecurity or doubt. We are talking about when the mind fragments to the point where we no longer know who we are, when thoughts arise and you no longer know where they come from or how to stop them. When the mind seems not to obey the heart, and the heart can no longer find God in the midst of chaos. Jesus reveals to you that even the darkest thoughts can be restored. Even the most broken minds can be completely healed. And to understand this, we need to enter one of the most disturbing and at the same time most powerful scenes in Scripture, the story of the Gadarene demoniac, a man who lived among the tombs. Isolated, chained, hurt inside and out. He screamed night and day. He got hurt with stones. He was naked, out of control, rejected, considered lost by everyone. The description is clear. His mind was completely dominated. There was no peace, there was no rest, there was no dignity. But Jesus crosses the sea just to get to him. Yes, he crosses a storm, a hostile region, only to find this man who no longer knew who he was. This shows us something so profound. Jesus does not wait for the mind to organize itself to love us. He goes to the abyss, to where pain hides, to where no one else dares to go. And when he finds the man, he frees him with a single word. The verse that marks this moment is too powerful to ignore. Sitting, clothed, and in his right mind. Mark 5:15. This is more than spiritual liberation. It is the total restoration of identity. It is the reorganization of the mind. It's the miracle that happens when Jesus enters someone's mental battlefield and says, "Here I command." The man who used to scream is now calm. The man who was injured is now healed. The man who was naked is now dressed. And what is, perhaps most impactful, the man that no one wanted around is now sent by Jesus as a messenger of grace. Have you ever felt this way? Like you've lost control of your own mind? Have you ever had thoughts that scared you? Have you ever had days when it felt like there was something inside you that wasn't you? As if your soul was screaming for help, but no one was listening. As if your mind had become your worst enemy. The truth is that many live exactly that. In silence. The torment of the mind is not seen in the body. It's a pain that no one understands. But Jesus reveals it to you. He doesn't just understand. He has the authority to silence every opposing voice, every mental chaos, every silent oppression that has been corroding your peace. Mental battle is one of the enemy's greatest strategies. He doesn't need to bind you with chains if he can trap your thoughts. He doesn't need to physically isolate you if he can convince you that no one cares. But here is the truth that breaks through these lies. Jesus will cross any distance just to reach you. He is not scandalized by his confusion. He does not turn away from his pain. He does not give up his mind. On the contrary, he fights for her. He declares dominance over her. He restores what the world said was irreversible, and perhaps this is the most transformative revelation of all. The state of your mind is not your destiny. Just because there are screams inside you today doesn't mean peace can't come. Just because today you feel like you've lost control doesn't mean Jesus isn't about to take over. He doesn't need you to understand everything. He just needs you to let him in. Just like Gadarene, you may not even be able to explain your pain, but Jesus already understands. And where he steps, darkness retreats. There's a secret hidden in this story, and few know this truth. The Gadarene man wanted to follow Jesus after being freed. But Jesus says to him, "Go back to your house and tell everything the Lord has done for you." This teaches us something great. Your liberation is not just for you. It is also to transform the environment around you. The restored mind becomes a living testimony. What today seems like meaningless pain, tomorrow will be evidence of God's glory. Now, take a deep breath and be honest with yourself. Have you ever felt out of your depth? Have you ever doubted your own sanity? Have you ever been afraid of your own thoughts? Jesus understands, and he didn't just come to relieve you, he came to restore you completely, so that you too can say like that man, "Today I am at peace. Today my mind is right." If this message touched your soul deeply, write in the comments, "Jesus, reign in my mind." Let this phrase be your declaration of faith, your silent surrender, your seed of liberation. Your comment can heal someone who is living this war in silence. And if you feel like this word needs to reach more people, share this video. Because sometimes one click is all that separates someone from despair to hope. But what happens next will change the way you see everything. Because even when we are surrounded by outer darkness, there is an inner light that can ignite a revolution. And this light begins where we least expect it, inside the prison. But what if the pain that paralyzes you today is not inside your mind, but around you? What if the screaming storm is not just in your thoughts, but in the reality you see before your eyes? Sometimes it's not the negative thoughts that bring us down the most, but rather the external circumstances that seem uncontrollable. And when everything falls apart around us, it's easy to think that God has abandoned us. But what if what you call prison is exactly the place where God will manifest the supernatural? What you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. It was around midnight, the time when hope falls silent, the prisoners fall asleep, and the guards become more alert. The iron chains made noise with every movement. The air was heavy, humid, filled with silence and anguish. Paul and Silas were trapped, hurt, wronged. They had been publicly beaten, exposed to shame, rejected for carrying the message of love. They could have been angry, they could have given in to the pain, they could have been silent, but they did the opposite. They prayed and sang. Yes, they sang. With scarred backs and bruised wrists, they praised God as if there were no chains, as if there was no darkness, as if they had already been freed, even before they saw the prison door open. Around midnight they prayed and sang hymns to God, and the other prisoners listened to them. Acts 16:25. Can you imagine the impact of this verse? Because in the midst of pain, they chose worship. At the moment when many curse, they exalt. And this is where the twist happens. Suddenly, like a whisper from God turning into an earthquake, the entire prison shakes, the doors open, the chains fall. But the most incredible thing is that Paulo and Silas didn't run away, because it wasn't just about physical freedom. It was about a faith that is not moved by what it sees, but by what it believes. Now take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment. What if you are Paul today? What if what holds you back are not bars, but debts, not currents, but diagnoses, not guards, but family crises? Has your midnight come? Do you feel surrounded, exhausted, with no way out? So listen, God's answer does not always come in the form of open doors, but of peace inside the prison. Maybe the miracle begins when even without strength, you decide to worship. How many times have you felt that your faith was too small to withstand everything that fell upon you? How many times have you tried to pray but only cried? And yet, a tear was heard, because your worship in pain is more precious to God than 1,000 words in joy. Hell shakes when someone hurt refuses to give up. The sky moves when a broken heart continues to praise. Jesus reveals to you it is not the environment that defines your faith, it is the faith that transforms the environment. When you understand this, prison becomes a pulpit, crying becomes a song, despair becomes a stage for the supernatural. Maybe God won't take you out of the situation now because He wants to show you that He can be with you in it, and that changes everything. Have you ever wondered if someone is watching your reaction in the midst of pain? The other prisoners. Listen to Paulo and Silas. Maybe someone around you is watching how you will react, and your faith can free other lives too. Your faith in the middle of your night could be the answer that another soul needs to see. You are not alone. And even though everything seems to fall apart, Jesus is still writing His story. If this message touched your heart, press the like button so that others can also be blessed. And in the comments say, "Even in my midnight, I trust in Jesus." Your declaration of faith could be the quiet encouragement someone is waiting for right now, but something even deeper is about to be revealed, because there are times when the enemy doesn't just attack you, he tries to make your mind his biggest battlefield, and what you will see next will confront the quietest thoughts that have been holding you hostage. But if even in the midst of an inner earthquake we can find freedom, what happens when the heart is constantly pulled towards the future in search of control, and the mind, trapped in predictions of tragedy, insists on living tomorrow before it arrives? The truth is that many live like this. They can't stop. Thinking about what could go wrong has become a habit. And when thoughts are always on what hasn't even happened yet, an invisible but devastating addiction is born: worry. It disguises itself as responsibility, but it is fear disguised as control. And Jesus, with His gentle but firm voice, unmasks this emotional prison with a speech that cuts like a sword. Therefore, I say to you, do not be anxious about your life, about what you will eat or what you will drink. Each day is enough for its own evil. Matthew 6:34. It's as if He is saying, I am here, I take care of every detail. Why do you insist on carrying what was never yours to bear? Jesus reveals to you that anxiety is not just a modern symptom. It is an ancient war. A war fought within us, where we lose battles that were never real because we fight against possibilities, not facts. And in this fight against the imaginary, we exhaust ourselves in reality. Now imagine the scene. Jesus on the mountain, crowds gathered, restless hearts, faces marked by the uncertainty of tomorrow. And He looking into the eyes of those who didn't know how to feed their children, how to pay taxes to the empire, how to survive on hard days. Jesus didn't ignore them. He confronted them with love. He repositioned them spiritually. And perhaps, upon hearing those words, an elderly woman felt the weight of the world lift off her shoulders for the first time in decades, because there, in the middle of a crowd, she finally understood. She was never in control, and it didn't need to be. The emotional pain Jesus addresses here is not small. It's a daily, continuous, repetitive pain. It's the mental exhaustion of those who try to predict all the possible failures of the future while trying to survive the present. Constant worry makes us slaves to scenarios that may never exist. It sucks the energy out of the now, steals the shine from simple moments, and takes us away from the presence of God. And so Jesus doesn't say, try not to worry. He compassionately commands, do not be anxious, because whoever is anxious is off the path of trust. And every step taken under the command of anxiety takes us away from the safe ground of faith. But what about you? How many nights did you waste trying to solve problems that never even happened? How many days did you live on automatic, ruminating on possibilities of failure, pain, abandonment, loss? Anxiety is a type of faith, only inverted. It is believing, with conviction, that the worst will happen. But Jesus reveals to you that living like this is carrying a cross that He never asked you to carry. The cross of control, of doubt, of predicting chaos. And there is a liberation that happens when you learn to rest. Not on a holiday, not in a comfortable bed, but in the heart of God. Rest in the certainty that tomorrow belongs to Him, and more. than that he is already there. So take a deep breath now, close your eyes for a moment and listen. Each day is enough for its own evil. These words are not just advice, they are a divine invitation, a call to step out of the cycle of worry and into the flow of trust. Today is all you have. Tomorrow does not yet exist, and yesterday has already been redeemed on the cross. Jesus doesn't ignore your fears, he silences them with promises, and every anxious thought that arises can be responded to with a new decision to trust. If this message touched something deep in you, comment now. Jesus, teach me to live one day at a time. Your confession could be the first step for someone reading the comments looking for hope. And if you feel this content needs to reach other people, share it. Because there are many like you who are tired of living trapped in a future that never arrives, and maybe all they need right now is that word. But what comes next will bring to the surface a kind of pain that many people try to hide, the feeling of being misunderstood even by those closest to them. Get ready, because what you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. But what happens when what hurts most is not the weight of life, but the feeling that no one really understands what you are going through inside? There are pains too silent to be explained in words, and there are times when even those close to you can't see what you carry. It's as if the soul screams in a language that no one speaks. And the worst part, sometimes, even when praying, it seems that heaven remains silent. Now imagine what it's like to be in that condition and still be judged for trying to seek God. That's what happened to Anna. She didn't scream, he didn't complain, he didn't make a fuss. I just prayed. With bitterness of soul, she poured out her pain before the Lord. His lips moved, but no words were audible, and therefore she was misinterpreted even by the priest. Eli himself thought she was drunk, a mistake that teaches us a profound truth. Even those who should understand you may not understand you, but God sees the heart. So she, with bitterness of soul, prayed to the Lord and wept abundantly. 1 Samuel 1:10. This verse reveals much more than a woman asking for a child. It reveals someone trying to survive the pain of not being understood, neither by her husband, nor by her environment, nor by her own faith. Anna represents all those who have felt invisible even in their prayers. People who cry not because of lack of faith, but because faith has not yet seen an answer. People who have become accustomed to silence, but still continue talking to God, even when it seems like he doesn't respond. Jesus reveals something profound to you here. There are prayers that do not need words to be answered. There is a cry that only God understands, and he understands it before you can even explain it. Anna prayed with her soul, and his soul was in pieces. She didn't ask for a blessing on her appearance. She didn't want to impress anyone with a powerful testimony. She just wanted to be heard. And perhaps at this very moment you are like Anna, praying without sound, crying without an audience, waiting without strength. If so, know that God is already hearing what no one else can hear. This pain of not being understood is devastating. It makes you doubt even your own sanity. It makes you shut up in environments where you should open up. It makes you close yourself, off even from God. But listen, the Lord doesn't need your words to understand your pain. He knows every tear before it even flows. And he will never mistake your cry for weakness. He will never accuse you for breaking in prayer, because that's exactly what Anna did. And that's exactly what opened the sky over her life. God did not answer the most beautiful prayer. He answered the most sincere prayer. And this is what Jesus reveals to you. The sincerity of the soul has more power than 1,000 well-rehearsed words. Have you ever felt misunderstood even by those who say they love you? Have you ever noticed that your greatest sufferings happened in silence, while you smiled so as not to worry anyone? There's a hard truth here. Some of the most spiritual people are the ones who keep quiet the most for fear of being judged. And many of them give up on faith, not because God failed, but because they felt alone in their own church, in their own house, in their own room. But Anna's story shows us that God answers the secret. May He honor those who cry out in silence. And that, no matter how much you feel ignored by men, you will never be ignored by God. The spiritual impact of this story goes beyond Samuel's miracle. It goes to the core of those who have been praying without seeing. It comes to you asking yourself, does God understand what I'm going through? Does He see this pain that even I can't explain? The answer is in the text itself. God didn't just see, He intervened, He remembered, He honored, and He did it without Anna needing to convince anyone, because when the soul speaks, heaven listens. If this word touched your soul, write in the comments, God understands my silence. Maybe your message won't change the world, but it can heal the heart of someone who also feels invisible. Share this video if you believe more people need to hear that their silent prayers have value too, because sometimes the strongest faith is the one that still keeps praying, even when no one listens. And here comes the most impressive part of this journey. There are moments when the pain turns into persistent insomnia, as if the body screams for rest, but the soul no longer knows what peace is. What you're about to discover will change the way you face your loneliest nights. But what about when night comes, and everything that should be rest turns into an invisible battle inside the mind? When the pillow becomes an altar of silent tears and the bed a battlefield where the enemy whispers lies, fear, and guilt. Insomnia is not just the absence of sleep. For many, it is the absence of peace. It's proof that the soul is tired but can't switch off. There are nights when the exhausted body begs for rest, but the mind won't allow it. And in those moments, the silence in the room screams louder than any crowd. This is where the story of someone who faced persecution, anguish, and death threats comes in, but still found rest where no one expected, in the midst of chaos. David was running away, not from any enemy, but from his own son. Absalom, his blood, had risen up against him, seized the throne, and turned the hearts of the people against his father. Imagine the weight of that, being betrayed by the one you love, having your leadership, your integrity, and even your paternity called into question. David wasn't just running for his life, he was carrying devastating emotional pain. And yet, in that dark moment, he declares something almost inconceivable to the natural mind. I lie down and sleep in peace, for you alone, Lord, make me live in safety. Psalm 3:5. How is it possible to sleep peacefully while everything is falling apart around you? How can you close your eyes when your heart is in pieces? The answer is what Jesus reveals to you today. True peace does not come from the absence of problems, but from the presence of God. David shows us that even on the run, even in the valley, even surrounded by betrayal, it is possible to rest. Not because the situation changed, but because he knew who his trust was in. He laid his head on the pillow, not because everything was resolved, but because the Lord was with him. Now look at your own life. How many nights have you spent awake, trying to find a solution to something that is beyond your control? How many times have you tossed and turned in bed, with your mind racing, imagining scenarios, blaming yourself for mistakes, fearing tomorrow? How many times have you slept with your body exhausted and woke up even more tired? Because sleep didn't bring true rest. There are people who rest 8 hours a night and still feel exhausted, because what steals peace is not the clock, it's the soul. And only Jesus can bring relief to the tired soul. David teaches us something that breaks human logic. It is not the absence of struggles that guarantees rest. It is the certainty that God is fighting for you. When he says, I sleep in peace, he is surrounded by threats. He is emotionally shaken. You are being unfairly treated, but still he sleeps, because he understood that while he rests, God works. And this is what Jesus reveals to you today. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to control everything. You just need to trust. Spiritual rest does not come when everything is fine. It comes when you surrender into God's hands what is beyond your strength. If you are experiencing peaceful nights, carrying the weight of insomnia like an invisible burden, know that there is rest for you. No, we are not talking about a breathing technique nor a medicine. We are talking about a place in the spirit where you find safety even in the midst of war. David accessed this place not because he was perfect, but because he was dependent. And you can too. Close your eyes and imagine Jesus sitting at the foot of your bed. Imagine him placing his hand on your head and saying, "I am here, you can rest." Take a deep breath. Allow yourself to feel this truth. You were not created to carry everything alone. Emotional insomnia is a reflection of the human attempt to solve spiritual problems with natural strength. But there is relief available now. When you surrender, Jesus involves you. He doesn't just calm the sea, he calms you. Because sometimes the miracle isn't what changes on the outside, it's what changes on the inside. If this word found an echo in your heart, comment now, "Lord, I need your peace." Your comment could be the awakening of faith that someone needs today to finally be able to sleep peacefully. And if this message touched your heart, press the like button so that others can also be blessed. Remember, your gesture can be God's instrument to reach those who also suffer in silence. Share this message with someone who has struggled with insomnia of the soul. Peace is contagious, and when you spread peace, God showers you with even more. But there is an even deeper pain, one that doesn't come at night, but that drags on throughout the day, the pain of losing hope for change. And what you're about to hear might be exactly what your heart has been waiting for a long time. The Shay. Next story will challenge the idea that it's too late. What if they told you that what seems definitive is not the end? That the situation that you have already declared dead can still be the scene of a miracle? There are moments when life seems to push us towards the end point. A door that doesn't open, a relationship that breaks down, a diagnosis that silences hope. And then something inside us dies too. Faith fades. The prayer is silent. The heart hardens. It is in this place of total impossibility that Jesus reveals something that can transform everything. The glory of God does not depend on circumstances being favorable. It manifests itself precisely when everything seems lost. Imagine the scene. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. The body already gave off an odor. The sisters' eyes were swollen from crying. Friends and neighbors gathered to console, but the pain was dull, overwhelming, almost palpable. Martha, one of the sisters, runs to Jesus and says in a choked voice, "Lord, if you were here, my brother would not have died." Her heart carried faith, but also frustration. Faith in the power of Jesus, but frustration at the time in which he arrived. It was already late. Or was it? And then comes the answer that spans time and reaches you now. If you believe, you will see the glory of God. John 11:40. This is not an invitation to understand, but to believe, because true faith is not born in comfort. It is forged in the midst of pain when everything seems contrary. What Jesus reveals to you here is more than a miracle of resurrection. It's a lesson about time, about trust, and about the power that transcends what our eyes see. Have you ever felt like Martha, carrying unanswered prayers, believing that if God had acted sooner, the pain would have been avoided? Have you ever had that bitter feeling that you arrived too late for your story? Maybe you look at your emotional life, your marriage, your mental health, or even your faith, and see only a grave, a place where there used to be life, but now there is only silence, darkness, disenchantment. But what if I told you that it is precisely there, in the place where they buried their dreams, that Jesus is about to reveal himself? Because what this story shows us is that Jesus didn't just arrive, he waited. Time passes, 4 days, days of mourning, of tears, of hopelessness. Why? So that no one would say it was a coincidence. To make it clear, the glory of God can only be seen when everything that man could do has already been done. When there is no longer any human hope, then divine hope shines with full force. What if what you are experiencing today is not the end, but the perfect setting for God's glory to manifest? What if this waiting time is producing something bigger than you can imagine? Sometimes Jesus is late in human eyes, but he never arrives after the time determined by God. His apparent delay is, in fact, preparing the environment for an indisputable miracle. And if Lazarus had not died, the world would not have seen that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. There is something in this story that many ignore. When Jesus arrives at the tomb, he cries. This is more than empathy, it's identification. Jesus feels your pain. He is not indifferent to your tears. He is not absent in your silence. He's crying with you, but he is also about to call out what is dead. He is saying to his tired heart, Lazarus, come out. It doesn't matter if it was 4 days, 4 years, or a lifetime. His word still has the power to resurrect what you already considered lost. Jesus does not need an ideal scenario to act. He just needs faith. It is not grandiose, performative faith, but simple, sincere faith. Faith of someone who no longer knows what to do, but chooses to believe anyway. Faith of someone who says, Lord, I don't understand, but I trust. This is the faith that moves heaven. This is the faith that causes the stone to be rolled away. This is the faith that turns tombs into testimonies. And maybe right now your mind is resisting. Maybe you're saying, but my pain is different. Yes, it's unique. And that is precisely why God wants to act personally with you. Because your miracle will not be generic. It will be so profound, so remarkable, that you will not just see the glory of God, you will carry it. It will be impossible to look at your life and not see that it was Jesus who entered the valley and brought life back. If this message spoke to you in a special way, declare in the comments, I believe, even when everything seems dead. Your comment may awaken faith in someone who has also been waiting for a miracle for 4 days. And if this word touched you deeply, press the like button, not just out of engagement, but as an act of faith. Because your touch today, just like Martha's touch in Jesus, can activate a movement that goes beyond what we see. But what you are about to hear next will touch one of the deepest wounds of the human soul, the feeling of failing God. And the revelation that comes now will change the way you see your own story. There is an even quieter pain, the one that arises when you feel like you have let God down. It's not just guilt, it's a weight that isolates you, sucks you inside, and makes you hide even from His presence. It's as if your mind whispers day after day, you have failed, God can no longer trust you. And this kind of thinking not only consumes, but poisons everything. Your prayer loses strength, your faith weakens. And what was once intimacy with God becomes a wall of shame and self-accusation. But Jesus reveals something to you today that can completely change this narrative. No matter the size of your mistake, He still looks at you with eyes of restoration. The morning was cold. The city slept, but Peter's heart was at war. He had promised allegiance. Even if everyone abandons you, I will never leave you. But a few hours later, courage was overcome by fear. Once, twice, 3 times, he denied knowing Jesus. And then, the look. Yes, that look that crossed him at the exact moment of the third denial. The rooster crowed, Pedro stopped, and Jesus looked at him. Luke 22:61-62 says, Then the Lord turned and looked at Peter, and he went away and wept bitterly. Feel the weight of it. Pedro did not run away from the pain. He faced what he had done. He cried bitterly. It wasn't an ordinary cry. It was a pain that comes from the awareness of having broken a promise, of having abandoned the one he loved most at the most critical moment. That night, Pedro's mind became a battlefield. Internal voices accused. Shame screamed louder than hope. The heart sank with guilt. And maybe that's exactly how you've been. Feeling like someone who, despite all the love you have for Jesus, has failed. But here's the wow moment that Jesus wants to reveal. He already knew. Yes, Jesus already knew about Peter's fall before it even happened, and yet he chose him. Still, he loved him. Still, he prayed for him. In Luke 22:32, before the fall, Jesus said, "I have prayed for you, that your faith fail not. And when you are converted, strengthen your brothers." This is more than anticipation. It's scheduled restoration. Jesus does not cancel Peter. It prepares you to come back stronger. The mistake didn't define the end. It was just part of the journey. That would transform him into someone capable of lifting others up. And that goes for you too. Maybe you are stuck with a memory, a sin, a betrayal, a wrong decision that still screams inside your mind. And what stops you from moving forward is not the lack of faith in God, but the lack of forgiveness for yourself. You look in the mirror and don't see someone worthy of starting over, but Jesus reveals it to you. He does not see you through the lens of your failure. He sees you for the promise that still stands. Because his grace does not reach you after a victory, it hugs you within to stay. The most powerful proof of this is Jesus' reunion with Peter after the resurrection. Jesus does not appear to accuse, he does not point the finger, he does not demand explanations. He asks, "Do you love me?" John 21:15, 3 times, one for each denial, as if to say, "I don't want you to live with the weight of guilt. I want to restore what was broken." This is redeeming love. This is deep emotional healing. This is Jesus rewriting the identity of someone marked by shame. And maybe that's the key you needed today. Jesus doesn't just want to forgive you. He wants to restore your mission. Peter did not return to being just a disciple. He became a leader, a pillar of the church. God turns your mistakes into testimonies, its falls into steps. And what the devil used to try to destroy you, Jesus will use to lift others up through you. The guilt that paralyzes does not come from God. The Holy Spirit convinces, yes, but to restore. The voice that accuses, that humiliates, that says, "You are no longer worthy." This does not come from heaven. This one comes from hell. And the more you listen to these lies, the more distant you feel from God. But today, at this very moment, there is a stronger voice wanting to silence these accusations. It's the voice that says, "Son, come. There's still room for you. There's still promise. There's still anointing. There's still purpose. Don't let the fall define your future. Don't allow guilt to push you away from those who love you." Jesus knew your error before you fell, and he has already provided for your restoration. The only thing he asks now is, do you still love me? Because if the answer is yes, even weakly, even shyly, even through tears, that is enough for him to lift you up with power. If this message found an open wound in your heart, comment, "I still love Jesus even after my falls." Your testimony can free others trapped by guilt. And if this word was balm for your soul, share this video with someone who also needs to rediscover grace. Remember, you are not alone. And the story does not end in denial. With Jesus, there is always redemption, but there is still a type of frustration that many carry in silence, the one that arises when, despite trying everything, nothing seems to work. And what you are about to discover will change the way you view your spiritual endeavors. And when have you tried everything? When you prayed, fasted, sought, cried, believed, and nothing changed? There is a tiredness that is more than physical. It's exhausting the soul. A type of wear and tear that cannot be resolved with a good night's sleep or well-intentioned advice. It's like you're constantly knocking on doors that won't open, as if your faith was being tested to the limit, and the question echoed within you, is it worth continuing to believe? Jesus reveals to you that there is a moment, an instant of encounter, in which everything changes. Not because you did more, but because you touched the right place. And this truth will change the way you view your spiritual efforts. It was another ordinary day for that woman, or perhaps another day of chronic pain, of crossed eyes, of social isolation. 12 years, 12 long years of bleeding, shame, and disappointment with doctors, with people, with promises that were never fulfilled. Mark 5:25-26 says, "And a certain woman who had had an issue of blood for 12 years, and had suffered many things with many doctors, and had spent all that she had, profiting nothing from it, but rather getting worse." Now think about it. She wasn't just sick. She was broken emotionally, spiritually, financially. You've tried everything. She was the living image of frustration. And maybe you identify with her. You've already tried to change. You've already looked for answers. He has already carried out prayer campaigns. He's already been to church. He's asked friends for prayer. He's cried silently at night asking for a sign, a touch from God. But the scenario doesn't change. The illness continues. The emotional problem continues. The marriage remains in ruins. The mind remains disturbed. Faith becomes fragile. Hope cools. Until one day you hear that Jesus is passing by, and something inside you says, maybe if I just play. This sentence changes everything. If I but touch the hem of his robe, I will be healed. Mark 5:28. It was not a theatrical faith. It wasn't something spectacular. It was a touch almost imperceptible to human eyes, but visible in the spiritual world. A silent, shy touch, but full of faith. And then the impossible happens. Verse 29 says, "And immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the disease." After years of frustration, of unsuccessful attempts, the miracle happened in a second, because she touched Jesus, and not just the system. She didn't just join the crowd, she connected with the source. And here's the unexpected twist. Jesus stops. In the midst of the crowd, he interrupts everything. "Who touched me?" v:30. The disciples find it strange. "Lord, everyone touches you." But Jesus knew. That touch was different. It was a touch of faith in the midst of despair. It was a soul saying, "I can't live like this anymore." And this type of faith, Jesus never ignores. He feels, he recognizes it, he responds. And then, in front of everyone, he looks at her and says, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed of your illness." Video 34. Jesus reveals it to you today. It's not about the number of attempts. It's about playing with faith. Maybe you're exhausted from trying. Maybe you're feeling ashamed because you can't believe like you used to. But Jesus is not looking for strength. He is seeking truth, a sincere heart that even if tired still says, "If I just touch." It is this faith, even if small, even if it is almost fading, that moves the sky. Don't give up now. You're next. Tap could be the one that unlocks everything. This story shows you that the faith that really heals is the one that is born in the midst of pain. It doesn't come from comfort, it comes from anguish. It is forged in frustration, in the tiredness of everything that didn't work. At the bottom of the well, where you say, either Jesus touches me or I'm not getting out of here. And it is in this place that the greatest miracles happen. Because when you surrender, Jesus acts. And perhaps what hurts you most today is not the pain itself, but the feeling that you were not heard, that your prayers were ignored. But look what Jesus says to that woman, "Daughter." He calls her daughter, someone who was rejected by society, impure in the eyes of religion, invisible to men, but fully seen by the Son of God. He didn't just heal her body. He restored his identity, and that's what he wants to do with you. If this message spoke directly to your point of exhaustion, comment now, "Jesus, I just want to touch you." Maybe your comment isn't just a rant, it's a spiritual cry that heaven will hear. And if you know someone who has tried everything and is about to give up, share this message. Your gesture can be the bridge between someone and the miracle they have been waiting for years. And if that word touched you deeply, hit the like button now, because that simple click could be the touch that brings hope to another exhausted heart. But there is a type of pain that goes beyond frustration. It is when you feel completely lost, aimless, without direction, as if all the roads in life were closed. And what you're about to hear will change the way you face your moments of disorientation. And when it seems like everything around you is moving, but when life runs in directions you can't follow, and your heart whispers an anguish that no one else hears. I don't know what to do. What comes now goes straight to the point of this silent but deep pain, because Jesus reveals to you that it is exactly in the silence of uncertainty that he begins to act with more intensity. There are times when our feet tremble not because of fear, but because we don't know what the next step is, not out of cowardice, but out of confusion. It's as if all the options seem wrong, and the fear of making mistakes stops even the desire to move forward. This was exactly the scene before the people of Israel on the banks of the Red Sea. They had come out of slavery in Egypt. They were finally free. But freedom put them in a dead end. Behind them, Pharaoh's army approached with violence and a thirst for revenge. Ahead, the sea is deep and impossible to cross. It was as if God had led them straight into a trap. And maybe that's how you feel right now. You trusted. He took steps of faith. He made resignations, and yet he found himself cornered, not knowing whether to turn back, wait, run, because there is no clear direction. And in the midst of this chaos, the voice of Moses echoes with an authority that comes from above. The Lord will fight for you, and you will be silent. Exodus 14:14. This statement changes everything. It was not a battle plan. It wasn't a magic formula. It was a call for total trust, to a silence that is not passive but reverent, to a surrender that is not giving up but obedience. Because sometimes what God needs from you isn't movement, it's silence. It's knowing how to stop, breathe, and recognize, I am not the author of my exit, but he is. Jesus reveals to you that in the moments when you feel most lost, that is when he is closest to leading you. But he won't do it shouting, it won't push you. He will whisper to your soul, and you will only listen if you shut up. Because divine direction is not born in the midst of hustle and bustle. It flourishes in the silence of trust. And that's what happened. God commanded Moses, "Tell the people to march." But before marching, there was silence. Before crossing, there was a pause. Before the miracle, there was trust. Then something absolutely extraordinary happens. The sea, which was an obstacle, opens up. Not because someone tried to force him, but because someone obeyed. The presence of God, invisible until that moment, manifests itself with glory and power. The people walk on dry land, while the waters rise like living walls. And that crossing, which seemed impossible, becomes an eternal landmark of God's faithfulness to those who trust even without seeing. The path, and here is the revelation you may need most today. Your confusion is not a sign of abandonment. It is an invitation to dependence. God's silence is not absence, it is preparation. The lack of visible direction is not punishment, it is strategy. Because when you are blinded by paths, Jesus is guiding behind the scenes. When everything seems blocked, he is already parting the sea, even if you don't see it yet. So take a deep breath now and receive this word. If you feel lost, it's not the end. It's the beginning of trust. And Jesus is more interested in your surrender than your performance. He wants you to rest. Stop trying to force solutions. Let it be still, because it is in this silence that the miracle will begin. If this message spoke to your heart and you are experiencing exactly this moment of confusion, comment now. Jesus, guide me in silence. Your comment can be like that first step on the journey. And if you know someone who is directionless, share this word with them. Be the bridge that takes her back to the path of faith. And remember, your pain today can be the testimony that tomorrow will open the sea for others. There is something even deeper is about to be revealed. And if silence hurts, imagine what it's like to pray and feel like not even God is listening. What comes next will completely transform your perception of the silence of the sky. Get ready to understand why sometimes it takes a while to respond. and what's really happening while you wait. And if there's something that paralyzes more than fear or doubt, it's silence. But not just any silence. It's the one that comes after you've prayed with everything you had, with every tear, with every sigh, with every drop of faith you had left, and still nothing changes. Have you ever been to this place? Where you bend your knees, but it feels like you're talking to the walls, where you pray and pray, but it seems like heaven is locked away, and God absent. And what happens when you insist for days, weeks, months, years, and there's still no response? When does prayer, which should be a relief, become a reminder of the silence that hurts? Jesus reveals to you that even what seems ignored is being heard. This truth is hidden in one of the most mysterious and profound moments in Scripture, Daniel's cry. He had put himself into fasting and prayer. I was looking for answers, and for 21 days, nothing happened. No vision, no sign, no word, just silence. But what Daniel didn't know was that from the first moment he opened his mouth to pray, the sky moved. The answer had already been released, but she was held back, facing invisible spiritual resistance. A conflict in the heavens that he could not see, but that God was already winning for him. And when the answer finally arrives, the angel says, "From the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard." Daniel 10:12. Do you realize what this means? The prayer had not failed. The answer was not negative. She was just at war. Because there are spiritual battles that take place between your prayer and the manifestation of the answer. And often, what seems like an absence is a battle behind the scenes. Maybe today you are at that exact point. You have already asked in faith, you cried, you waited, but still nothing has changed. Jesus reveals to you that this is not rejection, it's war, it's process, it's resistance being broken. And what you need to understand is that persevering in prayer is not repeating empty words. It's continuing to believe that what you don't see yet has already started to happen in the spiritual world. And when you understand this, you don't give up, you take a stand, you remain, you pray with conviction, even when emotions say, it's no use. How many times have you thought, if God loved me, he would have responded by now? But what if I told you that the answer is already coming, and that your prayer was not only heard, but valued, that the time of silence is not proof of indifference, but a field for maturation, and that there are answers that, if they arrive too soon, would do you more harm than good? Take a deep breath. Allow yourself to feel this truth. You are not praying in vain. God is not silent because he has forgotten you. He is acting in the invisible, at the right time, in the right way, in a way you never imagined. But for that, you need to keep going. You need to do like Daniel. Don't stop on the 10th day. Don't give up on the 20th, because victory is in the 21st. And maybe you're one step closer to seeing what you've prayed for so long. This word is for anyone who has ever screamed into their pillow after prayer, for anyone who has ever thought about stopping trying, to those who tearfully said, Lord, I can't pray about this anymore. Jesus reveals to you that you are not speaking to the void. Your every word rises like incense. Every tear he collects, every cry he memorizes, and he is not indifferent. He is on the move. If this word found you in that place of spiritual exhaustion, write in the comments right now, I choose to continue believing. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the immediate answer. It's the faith that remains even in the dark. And if you know someone who stopped praying because they thought God didn't listen anymore, share this message with them. She needs to know that she is not alone. Your act of sharing can reactivate someone's dormant faith. And if this message touched your heart, press the like button so that others can also be blessed. This is more than a click. It is a seed of faith planted in the hearts of those who are on the verge of giving up. But what comes now may completely redefine the way you view faith, because there is a powerful secret hidden in the smallest of details, something that many ignore, but that Jesus reveals to you clearly. In the next and final block, you will discover what happens when your faith seems too small to move anything, and why, even so, God still moves heaven for you. After walking through so much pain, silence, and insecurity of faith, there is a feeling that is perhaps the quietest of all, and the most underestimated. It's that moment when you look inside yourself and think, my faith is too small. You don't feel incredulous. He is also not rebellious, nor cold, nor distant. You simply feel like you don't have enough strength to believe as you once believed, and it breaks you inside. Because you start to think that to be heard by God, you need to have enormous faith, a faith of mountains, a faith of martyrs, of heroes. And when you realize that your faith seems tiny, comes shame, doubt, and the desire to remain silent. But Jesus reveals to you that it is exactly there, in this small, fragile, almost imperceptible place, that the faith that moves the heavens is born. Because it's not the size of faith that transforms, it's the place where it is placed. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus said, "If you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." Matthew 17:20. A mustard seed, the smallest of all grains known in the context of the time. Something that almost disappears in the palm of your hand. And yet Jesus declares that it is enough to move mountains. And here is the secret hidden in this statement. The mustard seed, despite being small, carries within itself a power of growth that surpasses human logic. He doesn't stay small. It germinates. He breaks the earth. It grows silently until it becomes something visible, strong, rooted. This is exactly what happens when you offer your faith, no matter how small it may seem, into God's hands. He does not despise. He cultivates. Jesus is not waiting for you to become someone full of answers, certainty, and unshakable strength. He is waiting for his little yes, your little prayer, your timid attempt to trust again, because for him this delivery has eternal value. Maybe you look around and see people with loud, intense public faith and feel insufficient. But heaven celebrates when someone, in the midst of pain, whispers, "Lord, I still believe." This is faith. It moves mountains. And if you feel like your faith is low, remember, this is how Jesus himself taught it works. He never demanded much, just sincerity, delivery only, just a grain. And it is exactly this faith that he multiplies, the faith that remains even when everything seems contrary, the faith that continues even after a not yet, the faith that insists even with tears in your eyes. This is faith that touches the heart of the Father. The problem is not having little faith. The problem is not using the little faith you have, because faith, even small when activated, releases something much greater than you can imagine. And that's why today, Jesus reveals to you what you think is small, fragile, and insufficient is exactly what he will use to bring down the giants in your life. You don't have to wait to feel stronger. You just need to start with what you have now. Take a deep breath. Imagine Jesus looking you in the eye and saying, "I know you're tired, but just one step of faith is enough." That's all he expects. Not to judge you, but to support you. To remind you that true faith is not measured in size, but in surrender. And maybe that's why you felt God so close so many times, just when you felt weakest. Because it is in this place that he reveals himself as perfect strength. If this word spoke to your heart, comment now. My faith, however small it may be, is in you, Lord. Write this down as a prophetic act, as if to say, I'm not giving up. And if you know someone who is feeling weak in their faith, share this message with them. This could be the boost she needs to keep going. Your simple gesture can be the seed that sprouts in someone's heart. And here we come to the end of this journey, but not the end of what God is doing in you, because the faith that began as a grain will grow, it will bloom, it will break the mental structures that have imprisoned you for so long, and he will rebuild, stone by stone, an unshakable trust, a faith that does not depend on what you feel, but on what you believe. And this faith will sustain you on good days and bad days. It will silence the thoughts that scream. It will break away from the lies you have believed for so long, because Jesus reveals it to you. It's not about how much you believe. It's about who you choose to believe in, even with a mustard seed.